Catherine Ardell let the iron knocker fall, and the sound rang through the great house like a verdict. She had come to beg a duke for shelter. One night, a corner, a stable if it came to that, and standing on the broad stone step in the last copper light of a summer evening, she understood that she had nothing left to offer in exchange but the truth. Her gloves were grey with road dust. Her hem had dried stiff with it. Somewhere behind her, beyond the avenue of limes, the post-chaise that had carried her this far rattled away into the dusk without her, and she did not turn to watch it go. The door opened on a wedge of candlelight, and the smell of beeswax and cold stone. Yes? The butler took her in, the dust, the single battered bandbox at her feet, the absence of any carriage, and his face arranged itself into the particular blankness servants kept for women who arrived on foot. The family is not receiving. I have not come to be received. Her voice held steadier than she had feared it would. I have come to ask the Duke for shelter. Tonight only. My name is Mrs. Ardell. He will not know it. But he knew my husband, Captain Henry Ardell, of the 12th. If you will only carry that name to him, I will wait here on the step and trouble no one. Heat still rose off the flagstones from the long day, a dry mineral warmth against her ankles, though the sky above the parkland had gone the deep bruised violet that promised thunder before morning. The butler hesitated. Behind him the hall stretched away, marble and shadow, a single branch of candles burning on a console table, as if the house grudged even that much light. Wait here, he said, and the door closed, and she was alone with the moths. She counted them to keep from counting other things. 4 of them, batting at the fanlight glass above the door, drawn to the thread of candlelight within. She had walked the last 3 miles, because the chaise would carry her no further, without coin she did not have, and her feet throbbed inside her boots in time with her pulse. A 12-month ago she had been a captain's wife with a snug house in Winchester, and a garden she had planted herself. Now she had a bandbox, a folded letter she could not bring herself to send, and the name of a man she had never met. The door opened again. Not the butler. The Duke of Avonmore filled the frame of it the way a man fills a doorway when the house belongs to him, and he has forgotten there is any other kind. He was younger than she had let herself imagine, not above 8 and 20, broad through the shoulder beneath a plain dark coat he had clearly dressed in himself, his cravat loosened, his dark hair pushed back by an impatient hand. He held a candle, and its light caught the hard line of his jaw and the wariness in his eyes, which were grey and very direct. You knew Henry Ardell. It was not quite a question. I married him. Catherine met his gaze and did not lower hers. 5 years ago, in the spring, he spoke of you once. He said you pulled him out of the Beresford River when you were boys, and that he never thanked you for it properly. Something moved behind the Duke's eyes, and was gone. He thanked me by never letting me forget I was wet to the waist in front of the whole village. His voice was low, even, with no warmth in it that he would admit to. He is not with you. No, the word cost her more than she let show. He has been a 12-month in the churchyard at Winchester. Fever, after the regiment came home. I have buried him, sir, and I have buried the house we lived in, and the creditors have had the rest. I am not too proud to tell you plainly. I have walked from the turnpike because I had nowhere else within a day's reach that I had any claim upon at all. She drew a breath. And I have only the thinnest claim upon you. One night, I will be gone before the household stirs. The Duke looked at her for a long moment. Out across the park, low and far, thunder cleared its throat. Come in, he said, before the rain finds you. She stepped over the threshold, and the cool of the marble hall closed over her like water. He did not take her to a drawing room. He took her, candle held high, down a corridor lined with portraits whose painted eyes she felt more than saw, to a library where a fire had been let burn low in the grate despite the warmth of the season, as though someone in this house was always cold. Books rose on every wall into the dark. A great desk stood near the window, its surface a chaos of papers, and beside it she saw this, and her heart turned over, A child's wooden horse lay on its side on the carpet, abandoned mid-gallop. "Sit," the Duke said, nodding at a chair by the hearth. "You will have something." "Mrs. Pruitt," this to the housekeeper who had appeared in the doorway, a spare grey woman, with a face like a closed account book, bread and cold meat, and the Madeira, and have the blue room made up. "The blue room, Your Grace." Mrs. Pruitt's eyes flicked once over Catherine's dust and drew their own conclusions. "Shall I send up the warming pan as well, or does the lady mean to be gone before it's warm?" "Mrs. Pruitt." "Sending it up, Your Grace," she withdrew. But Catherine had caught the dry twist at the corner of the woman's mouth and found, absurdly, that it steadied her more than kindness would have. Catherine sat. The fire's heat reached her at last, and she began, helplessly, to shake, not from cold, but from the sudden cruelty of comfort, after a day with none. She pressed her hands flat against her skirts to still them. The Duke crossed to the window and stood with his back to her, looking out at the gathering storm, and she understood that he had turned away to spare her the indignity of being watched while she came apart, and she was grateful to him for it, and she hated that she had come to a place where a stranger's tact was a gift. "You said one night," he said to the glass. "I did." "And after that?" "After that I will go to Bath." She said it as though Bath were a plan, and not merely a direction. "There are lodging houses there that take women to keep their books and answer their correspondence. I am quick with figures, and I have a fair hand. I will find a place. You will find a place." He turned. The firelight made his face unreadable. A captain's widow, gently bred, alone, without a character or a coin, walking into Bath off the Bristol Road. "Yes, I can see exactly the kind of place you will find. The contempt in it, not for her," she realized, "but for the world that arranged such things, landed like a slap all the same." She lifted her chin. "I did not come here to be lectured on my prospects, Your Grace. I am aware of them. I came to ask for a roof for one night, and you have given it, and I thank you. I will not trespass on your opinion of my future as well." For the first time, the corner of his hard mouth shifted. Not a smile, nothing so generous, but an acknowledgement. "No," he said, "I don't suppose you would." Mrs. Pruitt returned with a tray, set it at Catherine's elbow with a clatter that was somehow not unkind, and departed. The bread was fresh, and the meat was good, and Catherine made herself eat slowly, the way her mother had taught her, though she could have wept into the plate. The Duke poured the Madeira himself, and put the glass into her hand, and his fingers, broad, scarred across the knuckles in a way no idle nobleman's would be, brushed hers and withdrew at once. "I am going to say something to you," he said, settling into the chair opposite, his forearms on his knees, "that you will think presumptuous, and that I have no business saying to a woman I have known a quarter of an hour. But I have learned not to let the right moment pass while I find a politer one. So I will be blunt. And you may throw the wine in my face if you like." Catherine set the glass down on the tray very carefully. "You have my attention, Your Grace." Thunder broke over the house then, properly, and the first hard drops flung themselves against the long windows, and in the grate the low fire hissed where a gust came down the chimney. Catherine watched the Duke's face and felt the night tilt under her, the way a deck tilts before the wave has even reached it. "You need shelter," he said. "Not for a night. For your whole life, by the sound of it, a roof that will not be pulled out from under you, a name that creditors cannot touch, a place where no one in Bath or anywhere else can offer you the kind of position you are too proud and too clever to take. I have it in my power to give you that. And as it happens," his jaw tightened, "I need something only a woman in precisely your situation can give me. So I am going to make you an offer, and a condition, and you are going to hear me out before you answer." "An offer," she repeated. "Marry me." The rain came down in earnest. Catherine sat very still, the fire warm on one side of her face and the long cold of the room on the other, and was aware of every separate sound, the water on the glass, the settling coals, the great clock somewhere in the hall counting the seconds with monstrous patience. "You are not serious," she said at last. I am never anything else. It is one of my chief faults." He rose, restless, and went again to the window, and spoke with his back to her, as though the storm were easier to address than her face. "Hear the whole of it before you decide I have lost my reason. 6 months ago, my sister and her husband were lost. Their ship went down off Finisterre in the winter gales. They left a daughter, Lucy. She is 6 years old, and she is asleep 3 floors above us. And that horse on the floor is hers. She will not be parted from it, and I have not had the heart to make her." His hand closed on the window frame. "By her father's will, I am her guardian. But there is a clause. There is always a clause. And there is a cousin of theirs, a Mr. Sefton, who has read it more carefully than I did. The wardship of the child and the management of her fortune, which is considerable, may be contested if the appointed guardian is an unmarried man living alone, on the grounds that such a household is unfit to raise a girl. He has lodged the petition. It will be heard at the Michaelmas sessions. If I am unwed when it is heard, I am likely to lose her." Catherine's hand had gone, without her bidding it, to her throat. "And you would marry a stranger to keep her. I would marry the gatepost to keep her." He turned. In the stormlight his face had lost all its hardness, and showed her, for one unguarded instant, something so naked that she looked away from it, as he had earlier looked away from her. But the gatepost would not do for the magistrates. They want a wife, a respectable woman, gently born, of good character, who can stand up at the sessions and be the mistress of this house and the mother the child has lost. A captain's widow, Mrs. Ardell. A woman who has run a household, who knows her figures, who has buried grief and kept her dignity through it. You walked up to my door an hour ago as though you had been sent. By you, by God, or by accident, or by Henry Ardell's particular brand of meddling, which never did stop at the grave. His voice roughened. I am not asking for what a marriage usually asks. Understand me clearly, for I will only say it once, and I will say it plainly. This would be an arrangement. You would have your own rooms, your own income, your own life within these walls. I would make a settlement on you that no man could ever take from you, widowhood or no. In return, you would give Lucy a mother's care, and the magistrates a wife to look at. That is the whole of it. That is the condition. I am not the sort of man who would ask more of a woman who married him out of need. The fire popped. Somewhere above them, faint through 3 floors and a storm, Catherine thought she heard a child's voice cry out and then go quiet, soothed by a nurse, and she saw the Duke's whole body turn toward the sound like a needle to the north before he mastered it. You love her, Catherine said softly. His jaw worked. I am responsible for her. The words are not so different in this house. But she had seen the needle swing. She looked at the small wooden horse lying on its side on the carpet, and she looked at the man standing rigid against the rain, with his fortune and his title and his great cold house, who could buy anything in the kingdom, except the one thing the magistrates required, and who had been reduced to offering it to a dust-stained woman off the turnpike, because she had knocked on his door at the right hour of the worst year of both their lives. You don't know me, she said. I might be a fortune hunter. I might be cruel to her. I might be everything you cannot afford under your roof. You have known me a quarter of an hour. I knew Henry Ardell 20 years. He said it like a man laying down the last card in his hand. He was the worst judge of horses I ever met, and the best judge of people. He wrote to me 4 years ago, one of his rambling letters, full of regimental nonsense, and there was a line in it I have never forgotten. He said, I have married a woman with more courage than sense, Avonmore, and the great joke of it is that her sense is considerable. The ghost of something crossed his face. I did not understand the joke until you stood on my step in the dust and told me to my face that you would not be lectured. I am not a man who trusts easily, Mrs. Ardell, but I trusted Henry Ardell with my life when I was 11 years old, and he is vouching for you from the churchyard, and I find that I am inclined to take his word. Catherine rose. She did not entirely trust her legs, but she rose, because she would not hear this sitting down. She crossed to the hearth, and stood with her hand on the cool marble of the mantel, and looked into the low red heart of the fire, and behind her the rain ran down the glass, and the Duke waited with a patience she would later learn cost him everything. "If I say no," she said, "what becomes of tonight? Do I lose my roof for refusing you?" "No," sharp, immediate, almost offended. "Good God, no. You have your night either way, and the chaise to Bath in the morning at my expense, and a letter of character from the Duke of Avonmore that will get you any honest position in the city. My offer is not a trap. It is only an offer. You may refuse it, and sleep soundly, and think me mad, and I will think no worse of you." And it was that, not the title, not the settlement, not the prospect of a roof, that turned her. The fact that he had built her a door out before he built her a door in. The fact that a man who needed her so badly had refused, even so, to make her need a chain. "And Lucy," she said, if I agreed, and the magistrates were satisfied, and the cousin went away. What then? Would I be the child's mother in truth, or only for the sessions? Because I will tell you now, Your Grace, I have buried a husband, and I have buried a house, and I have very little left to lose, but I have not got it in me to play a part for a frightened little girl and then take it off again when the lawyers are gone. I would not do that to her. I would not do it to myself. For a long moment the Duke did not answer. The clock counted. The storm walked back and forth across the park. "No," he said finally, and his voice had changed, lower and stripped of all its plainness, and she understood that she had reached past the offer to the man beneath it. "No, I would not ask you to. If you take her, you take her. I would hold you to it, as I would hold you to nothing else." Catherine turned from the fire and looked at him, this stranger, this Duke, this boy who had once pulled her husband from a river and never been thanked for it properly, and she felt the whole of her ruined year gather itself behind her like a wave and break. "I cannot answer you tonight," she said. "You would not want a wife who could. But I will not go to Bath in the morning either. I will stay, a week, a fortnight, and I will meet the child, and I will see this house by daylight, and I will learn whether what you are offering me is a life or a cage, with the door painted to look like a garden. And then I will give you my answer, and it will be honest, whichever way it falls. Those are my terms, Your Grace." I have learned to have terms. Something eased in the broad set of his shoulders. Not relief, he would not allow himself relief, but the loosening of a man who has been bracing against a refusal, and met instead with a fair hearing. "Henry was right about you," he said. "More sense than courage, after all." He said more courage than sense. He said both. The corner of his mouth moved again, that almost smile that cost him so much. "I am beginning to think he was a better judge than I gave him credit for. Mrs. Pruett will show you to the blue room. We will speak in the morning, when you have slept, and when this," he gestured at the storm, the fire, the small fallen horse, the whole improbable scene, "looks less like a fever dream, and more like the cold arithmetic it is." She moved toward the door, and stopped, and looked back. He had bent and picked up the wooden horse from the carpet and stood holding it in one scarred hand, turning it over, righting its painted legs, and he did not know she watched him, and on his face was the thing he would not name in front of her. She read it as grief that had nowhere to go. She read it as a man who had been handed a child and a house and a title all in the same cruel winter and had no idea, none at all, how to be loved by any of them. "Your Grace," she said. He looked up and set the horse upright on the desk, and was the Duke again. "Good night," Catherine said, and "Thank you for the door out. It is the reason I will think seriously about the door in." She climbed the great stair behind Mrs. Pruett's candle, with her bandbox in her hand, and the rain on the roof, and the storm in her chest, and at the turn of the landing she passed a tall window, and saw lightning walk white across the summer park, and the world she had known fall away behind her for good. Whatever she answered in the morning, yes or no, she understood, with the cold clarity that comes once or twice in a life, that the woman who had knocked on that door at dusk was already gone, and that there would be no walking back down that drive to find her. Above her, 3 floors up, a child she had not yet met turned in her sleep and reached, without waking, for a wooden horse that was not on the pillow where she had left it. Catherine woke to birdsong and the smell of cut grass, and for one suspended moment did not know where she was. The blue room had been made up after all, warming pan and all, she thought, with a flicker of something that was almost a smile, and morning came through the half-drawn curtains in long bars of white and gold, washing the storm clean off the world. She lay still under unfamiliar linen, listening. Somewhere below a scythe whispered through wet grass. A wood pigeon turned its 3 soft notes over and over. The great house, which by candlelight had seemed all marble and grievance, breathed quietly around her now like any sleeping thing. She rose and washed in water that someone had left warm by the cold hearth, and dressed in her one good gown, the grey poplin, pressed by hands not her own, and laid across the chair while she slept, and found that the kindness of it sat strangely on her, like a coat cut for a larger woman. The corridor by daylight gave up its portraits. She walked the length of them slowly, reading the painted faces of dead Avonmores, hard-mouthed men and patient women in stiff lace, and at the very end, near the stairhead, a smaller canvas hung lower than the rest, newer, the varnish scarcely darkened. A young woman with the Duke's grey eyes, and none of his guardedness laughed out of it at something past the painter's shoulder. Beside her, a fair man's hand rested on her chair back. Catherine did not need to be told whose face this was. She stood before it until the laughter in it began to ache, and then she went down to find the living. She found the Duke in a small breakfast parlour that faced the morning, alone at the foot of a table laid for one, a litter of opened letters at his elbow, and a cup of chocolate going cold beside them. He rose when she came in, too quickly, a man unused to the courtesy and performing it anyway, and the summer light was unkind to him, showing her the shadows beneath his eyes that the candle had hidden. "You slept," he said. "Better than I had any right to." "Your house keeps its word, Your Grace." The warming pan came. Mrs. Pruitt would sooner be dismissed than have it said a guest of this house went to a cold bed. He gestured her to a chair, and a footman materialized with chocolate and rolls and a dish of summer plums beaded with cold from the cellar, and withdrew. "Sit, eat. We agreed to look at the arithmetic by daylight, and you will follow figures better with something in you." She sat. The plums were dark and sweet, and the chocolate was rich, and she made herself eat slowly again, and was aware of him watching her with that grey directness that did not trouble to disguise itself. "You are looking at me," she said, "as though I were a column you cannot make add." "I am looking at you," he said, "as though I expected to wake and find the whole of last night a fever, and you had chased 3 miles down the Bath Road. I am not a man who is often surprised by morning. It is a novelty. I find I do not entirely dislike it." It was so dry and so unexpected from that grave hard mouth that Catherine looked up startled and caught the faint, reluctant lift at the corner of his lips, gone almost before it came, the ghost of a man who had once known how to be amused and had put the habit away somewhere with his sister's laughter. She felt the surprise of it go through her like the first warm afternoon of a year. "You can jest," she said, "rarely and badly. Do not encourage it. The staff have only just stopped flinching." He turned a plum in his fingers and set it down uneaten. "Now, the arithmetic. You wish to see this house by daylight and judge whether I am offering you a life or a painted cage. So I will tell you the unpainted truth of it, and you will judge. Go on. The settlement I spoke of is £4,000, secured to you absolutely, in trust, beyond my reach, and beyond any future creditors, the day we wed." He said the sum the way another man might say good morning. "You would have the income of it whether you stayed under this roof, or chose, in 10 years, to keep a house of your own in Bath after all. Lucy's care would be your charge and your authority. The staff would answer to you as mistress here. I would not interfere in the nursery, having no notion how, beyond signing what wants signing. In exchange you would stand up at Michaelmas as my wife, and be, before the magistrates and the county, exactly the respectable woman the law requires. Catherine folded her hands on the edge of the table. And between us? You said an arrangement. I should like that arithmetic too, Your Grace, before I add the rest. For the first time he looked away, out at the bright lawn, where the gardener's scythe had stopped and the larks had taken up the morning. Between us, nothing you do not choose, he said. Separate rooms. Separate lives, as much as a shared name allows. I will not come where I am not asked, now or ever. I told you I am not the kind of man who asks more of a woman who marries him out of need, and I meant it as the only vow I am presently fit to make. His jaw set. I have buried enough this year. I have no wish to lay a claim on a woman who would spend her life flinching from it. She heard, beneath the plainness, the wound that had taught him to speak so, and chose, for now, not to touch it. Then I will meet the child, she said, before I weigh another figure. The nursery was at the top of the house, 3 floors up as he had said, in a wing where the summer light came soft and dusty through high windows, and the floorboards had been scrubbed pale. A spare, kind-faced young nurse rose and curtsied. The Duke spoke to her low, and she withdrew to the window seat with her mending, and there, on the hearthrug before a fire that no one had thought to let go out even in July, sat Lucy. She was small for 6, with her mother's fair hair and her uncle's grey eyes, and she was dressing the wooden horse in a doll's bonnet, with the fierce concentration of a child who has decided the world will be managed in at least this one particular. She did not look up. Lucy, the Duke said, and Catherine heard the whole of him change, the gravel gone soft, the command gone. Here is a lady come to visit. Mrs. Ardell, how do you do? Lucy said to the horse. How do you do? Catherine answered gravely, and did not approach. She sank instead onto the low fender stool an arm's length off, arranging her grey skirts, and looked at the horse rather than the child. He is very fine, though I think his bonnet is on backwards. The small hands stilled. It is not. No, Catherine agreed at once. I see now. The ribbons go behind. I have only ever dressed a cat, and a cat will not be told anything, so I am out of practice. A silence. Then, cautiously, as though against her own better judgment, you dressed a cat. In a christening gown. She was furious. She climbed the curtains in it, and we were 3 days getting her down. Catherine kept her eyes on the horse. He has been galloping, I think. He came down to the library last night and slept by the fire. Lucy's head came up at that, the grey eyes wide and suddenly young. He went down? She turned, accusing, to her uncle. You said he stayed. The Duke, standing by the door with his arms folded and his face working at something, opened his mouth and found nothing in it. It was Catherine who answered. He came back, she said. That is the thing about a good horse. He goes where he is needed in the night, and he is always home by morning. Look. Here he is. He has not left you at all. The child looked at the horse, and at the strange dusty-gowned lady on the fender stool, and some 6-year-old reckoning passed behind her eyes. She did not climb into Catherine's lap. She did not smile. But she shifted, by some inches, so that the horse stood between them rather than behind her, in the neutral country of the hearthrug, where a thing might be shared. And she said, You may hold him, but you must hold his legs, because they come off. Catherine took the warm-worn wood into her 2 hands, as carefully as she had ever taken anything, and over the child's bent head she met the Duke's eyes, and saw in them something so raw and so grateful that she had to look down at the horse to bear it. It did not last the morning. They had come down again, the 2 of them, the small truce of the nursery still warm between them, when a wheel sounded on the gravel, not the soft roll of a tradesman's cart, but the sharp bowling of a gentleman's curricle driven fast, and the Duke's whole frame went to iron in the space of a breath. Sefton, he said, before the butler had so much as reached the hall. Mr. Sefton came in on a wave of his own importance, peeling pale gloves from long pale fingers, and Catherine understood at once that the craft of the man was his beauty. He was perhaps 35, golden-haired, exquisitely made, with a face the Renaissance might have painted as an archangel and a mouth that had learned, somewhere along the years, to smile and mean the opposite. His eyes went round the hall, the marble, the portraits, the new lady in grey poplin standing too near the Duke, and totted them up like a man counting another's silver. Avonmore. He did not bow so much as incline. A fraction. An insult measured to the inch. Forgive the hour. I was at Cheltenham, and could not pass within 10 miles of you without paying my respects to dear Lucy. How does the child? The child is well, and asleep, and will not be disturbed. The Duke had set himself, without seeming to move, half a pace in front of Catherine, and the old scarred knuckles had closed at his sides. You did not drive from Cheltenham to ask after a sleeping girl, Sefton. Say what you came to say. So blunt. Sefton's pale gaze slid past him and fixed, warm and terrible, upon Catherine. But you have not made me known to your guest. I am all curiosity. The county had not heard that Avonmore kept company. My name is Mrs. Ardell, Catherine said, before the Duke could shield her from it. She had learned, in a year of bailiffs and lodging housekeepers, that a thing met head-on lost half its power to wound. I am a widow, sir, lately of Winchester. The Duke knew my late husband, a widow. Sefton tasted the word as though it were a vintage he suspected. Lately of Winchester. And lately, I think of nowhere at all, by the dust I am told was on your hem when you arrived on foot at dusk. His smile widened. The hall had ears, and he knew it, and he was speaking to the magistrates of Michaelmas through Catherine's startled face. Servants will talk. Mrs. Ardell, it is their one economy. And what they say is that the Duke of Avonmore, who has lived these 6 months as solitary as a monk, opened his door one stormy night to a penniless woman off the turnpike, and the very next morning cannot be parted from her. One does wonder at the arithmetic of it. The word was hers, he could not have known it, and yet it landed exactly where the morning's tenderness had been. And Catherine felt the colour go up her throat. You wonder a great deal, she said, for a man who came to ask after a child. I wonder, Sefton said softly, all the archangel gone out of his voice, and only the blade left, what a clever, ruined woman is worth to a desperate man. He has told you about the fortune, I suppose? No? He watched her face, and what he read there pleased him. Lucy is not merely a child to be loved, Mrs. Ardell. Lucy is £40,000 in trust, and the management of it goes to whoever holds her wardship. He does not weep over an orphan in the night. He weeps over a ledger. I only marvel that he found a wife quick enough to keep his hands on it, and cheap enough, by the look of your gown, to come at his price. That is enough. The Duke's voice came out of him like something breaking, and he had crossed the marble and taken Sefton by the lapel before Catherine knew he had moved. The two beautiful, furious men, nose to nose in the cold, bright hall. You will not speak to her so under my roof. You will not speak of Lucy as a sum. Get back in your curricle, Sefton, and say the rest of it to your attorney. Sefton did not flinch. That was the dreadful thing. He smiled into the Duke's rage as into a looking-glass. Oh, I shall say it to my attorney, he murmured, smoothing the crushed lapel when the Duke released him. And to the bench, at Michaelmas. A hasty marriage to a destitute stranger, contracted within a fortnight of the petition, by a man with 40,000 reasons to want the appearance of a settled home. Do you think the magistrates will not wonder at the arithmetic too? He drew on his pale gloves, finger by finger, unhurried. I do not need to prove you cruel, Avonmore. I need only prove you calculating. And a marriage of convenience to a woman who cannot afford to refuse you proves it for me, in open court, without my lifting a hand. He turned at the door and bowed, properly this time, deeply, to Catherine, the worst insult of all. Mrs. Ardell, do consider, before you sign anything, whether you would rather be a wife or a witness. I should be sorry to put you in the box. You have such an honest face. The curricle bowled away down the avenue of limes, and the dust of it hung gold in the summer air, long after the sound had gone. and Catherine stood very still in the cold hall, and felt the floor she had begun, so cautiously, to trust, tilt again beneath her. The Duke turned. Whatever he saw in her face made his own go grey. "You believe him," he said. "I do not know what I believe." She heard her own voice come out steadier than she felt, and was glad of it. "You did not tell me the sum, Your Grace. £40,000. You said her fortune was considerable, and let me imagine some genteel 3 or 4. You let me sit on a stool, and dress a horse, and think the whole of this was a frightened man and a motherless child. You did not tell me there was £40,000 standing behind the both of you. Because it is nothing to do with the both of you." He came toward her, and stopped, as though he had run up against the rule he had made himself that morning. "Do you imagine I want it? I have more than I can spend, and no one left to spend it on. The trust is hers, every farthing, to come to her at 1:20, and I would sign away my right to a penny of the management this hour, if the law would let me keep her by it. But the law will not. The law says the man who shelters her holds the purse, and Sefton means to be that man, and he does not weep over ledgers, Mrs. Ardell. He is the one who counts. He has debts in 3 counties. He has never in his life set eyes on that child, except to value her." Catherine searched his face. The grief was there, the grief she had read by the fire and again over the wooden horse, and she did not think a man could counterfeit the things she had seen in him when Lucy cried out in the night. And yet she had been a captain's wife, and had learned that the men who lied best were the ones who believed themselves. "You should have told me," she said, low, whatever the truth of it. "You built me a door out, Your Grace, and I honored you for it, but you kept back the size of the room. That is its own kind of cage. To be married into a fortune one was never told the height of. I came to your house with nothing but my honesty. I will not trade it for £4,000 and a lie of omission." He was silent a long moment. Out across the park the larks had not stopped singing. They did not know that anything had changed. "You are right," he said at last, and the admission cost him visibly. A man unused to laying down any weapon, even a wrong one. "I should have told you. I did not, because the moment I name the sum aloud I see it reflected in every face, the way you are half seeing it now, and I have grown so weary of being a fortune with a man attached, that I let you go on, one morning longer, thinking me only a man. That was my selfishness, and you have caught me in it, and I am sorry for it." He drew a breath. "But I will not unsay the offer. I will only say it again, with the whole of the figure on the table where it should have been. £40,000. Mrs. Ardell, and a child who has begun, in 3 days, to let you hold the one thing she owns. Weigh it however you must." She would have answered him. She did not yet know what she would have said. But Mrs. Pruitt came through from the back of the hall with a salver and a face like a slammed drawer, and on the salver lay a letter, the seal already cracked. "Begging your Grace's pardon." The housekeeper's dry voice did not soften, but her eyes, going from the Duke to Catherine and back, had in them the grim solidarity of a woman who had served this family through worse mornings than this. "This came by the boy from Gloucester, while that gentleman was poisoning the air in my hall. I'd not have opened it, but it's from Mr. Pell, and Mr. Pell don't write but when the news won't wait." She held it out. "If I may say so, Your Grace, that Mr. Sefton always did drive a curricle a deal too fast for a man with nothing to hurry toward. One does wonder what he's hurrying toward now." The Duke took the letter and read it, and Catherine watched the colour leave his face for the second time in an hour. "What is it?" she said. He looked up, and for once made no attempt to set his features to the Duke. "Pell is my attorney," he said. "He writes that Sefton has petitioned the bench to advance the hearing. He has found a friendly magistrate, and pleaded the child's welfare cannot wait on the Michaelmas calendar." His hand closed slowly on the page. "It will not be heard at Michaelmas after all. It will be heard in 3 weeks. 3 weeks." Catherine heard the great clock in the hall take up its monstrous counting, and felt the whole improbable bargain, the door out, the door in, the £40,000, The small, warm horse with legs that came off, narrow suddenly to a single point, like light through a burning glass, and knew that whatever answer she meant to give this man, the storm had not finished with either of them yet. In the pocket of her grey poplin, against her hip, the folded letter she had carried unsent from Winchester for a 12-month seemed all at once to burn, for it bore a name she had told no one in this house, and 3 weeks, she understood, was no longer time enough to keep a secret in. 3 weeks. Catherine heard the words leave her own mouth as though another woman had spoken them. The hall was bright now. The night's storm scoured clean away, and through the open door the limes threw long shadows down the avenue, where Sefton's dust still seemed to hang in the warm air. He has bought himself a magistrate. He has found one who owes him a kindness, which in this county is the same coin. The Duke turned the letter over in his scarred hand, as though the back of it might offer a kinder sentence than the front. Pell will fight the advancement. He writes that he will likely lose it. The plea is the child's welfare, and no bench cares to be seen to keep a motherless girl waiting upon its own convenience. Mrs. Pruitt had not gone. She stood by the foot of the stair with the empty salver against her flat grey bosom, and her mouth was a seam. 3 weeks to get a wedding, a wife, and a whole settled household out of a man who's lived like a hermit since the winter, she said, to the air, to no one. Well, I've made bread rise faster on a cold morning, Your Grace, but not by much. Thank you, Mrs. Pruitt. I'll see the linen aired in the long gallery regardless, said Mrs. Pruitt, for there's no harm in airing linen, whatever a woman decides, and she withdrew with the salver, her heels clicking away over the marble, leaving the two of them alone, with the sound of the larks coming in through the door. Catherine pressed her hand, without meaning to, against the side of her grey skirt, against the hard small thickness of the folded paper she had carried a 12-month, the paper that bore a name. It seemed to her, absurdly, to have grown warm against her hip, as a coal grows warm through a glove. You are doing arithmetic again, the Duke said. I can see it in your face. You have a particular look when you are carrying a sum you do not like. I am carrying a great many of them. She made herself meet his grey eyes. The summer light lay along the hard plane of his jaw, and showed her the shadows beneath, the marks of a man who had not slept though the storm had passed. You asked me last night for a fortnight to decide. You no longer have a fortnight to give. That is the first sum, and it is the cruelest, for it takes from me the one thing I asked you for, time to be sure I was not walking into a cage. I know it. His voice was low, and I will not pretend the clock is kinder than it is. But I will tell you this, and then I will leave you to it. For I have learned that pushing a woman toward a door makes her brace against it. He set the letter down on the console beside the dying branch of last night's candles. Whatever you decide it free. If you say no, the chaise is at the door within the hour, and the letter of character is in your hand, and you go to Bath a free woman with my blessing, and I will face Sefton as I am, and lose her, and survive it, because men survive worse. I will not have you sign your name to keep my house from grief. Do you understand me? I would rather lose Lucy honestly than keep her by frightening you into a marriage. It was the wrong thing to say, if he had wished to drive her toward the door out. It was precisely the thing to make her turn toward the door in. She looked at him standing there, in his plain dark coat, offering her freedom with both hands, when his whole heart was 3 floors above them, learning to dress a wooden horse, and she felt the last of her wariness shift on its foundations. I have not said no, Catherine answered. I have only said I will not be hurried into yes. Give me the day, Your Grace. Let me see the thing you are really asking, not the offer, the work of it. Let me see your papers, your accounts, the shape of what a mistress of this house would have to stand up and defend. I think better with figures under my hand than with a man's eyes on my face. Something that was nearly relief, that he would not allow to be relief, passed across his features. Then come to the library, he said. It is where the worst of it lives anyway. The library by daylight was a different country from the storm-lit cavern of the night before. The long windows stood open to the morning, and the smell of the room came to her in layers, old leather, candle smoke, the dry sweetness of paper gone soft with age, and under it all the green breath of the cut lawn drifting in on the warm air. The fire that someone had let burn low in the season was out at last, a grey feathering of ash in the great grate, and on the desk the wooden horse stood where the Duke had righted it the night before, its painted legs splayed for a gallop it would never finish. He cleared the litter of papers from one end of the desk with a sweep of his forearm, not careless but impatient, the gesture of a man at home in disorder. "Pell sends me everything," he said. "Every clause, every precedent, every spiteful little affidavit Sefton's people swear out. I read them, and I understand perhaps 3 words in 5. Henry used to say I had a head for horses and dogs, and nothing that lived between 2 covers. Henry could not add 2 columns of figures without losing one of them down his boot," Catherine said, and was startled by her own smile, and more startled to find it did not hurt. "Sit. Read me what you have. I will sort it as you go. There will be a shape in it. There is always a shape." And there was. She had not lied about her hand or her head. Within the hour the desk had ordered itself under her fingers, the petition here, the precedents there, Sefton's sworn statements in a damning little pile of their own, and she found, bent over the close lawyer's script with the sun warm across the backs of her hands, that the year of bailiffs and ledgers and lodging housekeepers had taught her something after all. She could read the bones of a thing through its flesh. She could see where Sefton was strong and where he was bluffing. Here, she turned a page toward him, her ink-stained finger on a line. "He claims a settled home requires a wife of established character. But, he cites no statute. It is custom dressed as law. A clever advocate could make the bench feel the difference." The Duke leaned over the desk to look where she pointed, and his shoulder came close to hers, and she was aware all at once of the warmth of him, the clean, plain smell of soap and horse, and the faint, bitter chocolate of his interrupted breakfast, and of how long it had been since she had stood near enough to a man to know the warmth of him at all. He did not move away. Neither did she. The clock in the hall counted on, monstrous and patient, through the open door. "You have done in an hour," he said quietly, "what Pell and I have failed to do in a month. Pell has read it as a lawyer. You have read it as a frightened uncle." She did not look up from the page. She did not trust her face. "I have read it as a woman who has been on the losing side of men with papers, and learned exactly how they cheat. That is all." The door opened a careful 6 inches, and a fair head appeared around it, grey eyes enormous, the wooden horse clutched against a pinafore. Lucy had escaped the nursery. She regarded the 2 adults bent over the desk with the grave suspicion of a child who suspects the world of conducting interesting business without her. "He wanted to come down," Lucy announced. "He likes it down here." The Duke straightened, and the iron went out of him as though a hand had passed over a string and stilled it. "Did he said. "By the fire, where he slept." She advanced into the room on small determined feet and set the horse on the carpet before the cold grate, exactly where it had lain the night before, and frowned at it. "But the fire is gone out." "It is summer, sweetheart," the Duke began, helpless, and Catherine saw him reach for the word and not have it, the grave, hard Duke undone entirely, by 6 years old, and a wooden horse. "He came down," Catherine said, kneeling, her grey skirts pooling on the carpet, "because he heard us working, and a good horse cannot bear to be left out of the work. Shall we give him a task? I have a great many papers, and they will keep blowing about in this lovely wind, and a horse with stout legs is exactly the thing to stand upon them and hold them down." Lucy considered this proposition with the full weight of her reason. Then she carried the horse to the desk and set him, with enormous care, upon the loose pile of Sefton's affidavits, his blunt wooden hooves planted on the lies of the man who meant to take her. "There," she said. "Now they cannot fly away." And Catherine, kneeling on the carpet of a Duke's library, in the warm green morning with a child she had met only that morning, looked up and met the Duke's eyes over the fair small head, and saw there a thing so unguarded and so dangerous to them both that she had to bend again to the papers to keep from saying yes, that moment, before she had read another line. It was among those very papers that she found him. The Duke had been called away, a steward at the door. Some matter of a field and a flooded ditch the storm had left. The dull machinery of a great estate grinding on whatever the heart was doing. And Lucy had been coaxed back to the nursery by the spare, kind-faced nurse with the promise of plums. Catherine worked on alone in the warm hush, the larks loud through the window, the scythe gone silent now that the morning's grass was cut. And she drew toward her the last of Pell's enclosures, a sheaf of the petitioner's own correspondence that the attorney had somehow obtained. The hand was strange to her. The signature was not. Julian Sefton. She had set the page half down before she truly read it, and then she drew it back into the light with fingers that had gone cold despite the heat of the day. Julian Sefton. She knew that name. She knew it as she knew the smell of the room in Winchester, where the men had come to take Henry's books and Henry's chair, and the small, bright garden she had planted with her own 2 hands. She had not known the man's face. He had never once shown it, had done his work through agents and attorneys, and a clerk with a cold he could not be bothered to nurse. But she had known his name. It had been at the foot of every letter that had stripped her bare. Julian Sefton, by his attorney. The holder of Henry's notes, the gentleman of honour who had let a captain's widow be turned into the road for a debt her husband had owed him across a card table in a garrison town, and had not relented for all her writing, all her pride swallowed, all her begging. The same man, the beautiful golden man who had stood in this hall an hour ago and called her gown cheap, the cousin who meant to take Lucy. The petitioner, Sefton. The room tilted, very gently, the way a deck tilts. Catherine sat down in the Duke's chair, because her legs had decided the matter for her, and she pressed both hands flat upon the desk among the papers, and she breathed. Outside the larks went on as if nothing in the world had changed. The wooden horse stood upon the affidavits with its painted gallop, holding down the lies of the man who had ruined her, in the house of the man who did not know she had been ruined by him. She thought, with a terrible clarity, of Sefton's parting words in the hall. Whether you would rather be a wife or a witness. I should be sorry to put you in the box. You have such an honest face. He had not known her then, she was certain of it. He had looked at her dust and her poplin, and seen only a desperate woman bought cheap. But Sefton was a man who made it his trade to learn the price of things. He had 3 weeks. He had agents and a cold nursing clerk, and the name Ardell, which he had heard her speak aloud in his own hearing, in this very hall. He would learn. Of course he would learn. And when he learned that the Duke of Avonmore's new-made wife was the widow of the very man whose notes he had called in, the widow he himself had turned into the road, that the marriage he meant to call calculating was in truth a marriage between his own 2 victims, he would have more than calculation to swear to at the bench. He would have malice, conspiracy, 2 ruined people who had every reason on earth to hate Julian Sefton, joining hands to keep him from his cousin's fortune. She would not be a witness for the Duke. She would be the rope Sefton hanged him with. Catherine's hand went, slowly, to the side of her skirt, and drew out the folded letter she had carried a 12-month, and laid it upon the desk beside Sefton's signature. And for the first time in a year she let herself look at the direction she had written upon it, in her own hand, in the worst week of her life, and never had the courage or the cruelty to send. To Mr. Julian Sefton. She did not show it to the Duke that day. She told herself it was prudence, that she must be sure, that she must think, but she knew. Lying awake in the blue room that night, with the warm dark pressing at the open window and the smell of the night stocks rising from the garden below, that it was something less clean than prudence. It was fear. To speak it aloud was to make it real. And to make it real was to hand the Duke a reason to send her away. And she had discovered, somewhere between a wooden horse and a man's warm shoulder at a desk, that she did not want to be sent away. She lit the candle at last, and unfolded the letter, and read it by the small unsteady flame, the moths coming at once to the window screen, as they had come to the fanlight on the night she arrived. It was not a begging letter, though she had begun it as one. It had turned, halfway down the page, into something else, into the only honest fury she had let herself feel in that whole grey year. You did not lend my husband money out of friendship, sir. You set a snare for a foolish brave man who could not say no to a wager, and you sprang it on his widow, while the churchyard grass was still raw. I have nothing left for you to take. I write only so that one living soul has told you plainly what you are. She had never sent it. To send it would have been to give him the satisfaction of knowing she was broken enough to write it. So she had carried it, the one defiant thing she owned, the proof that she had not gone silently. And now it was a weapon that could be turned in either hand. If Sefton's people found that she had once written such a letter to him, if it came out, in the box, that the Duke's wife had a year-old grievance against the petitioner sharp enough to put to paper, then Sefton would not need to prove the marriage calculating. He would prove it venomous, and the magistrates, who would forgive a cold bargain sooner than a hot vendetta, would hand him the child. A soft knock. Catherine folded the letter against her breast before she called out. Mrs. Pruett came in with a fresh candle and a small covered dish, and set both upon the table without ceremony. You didn't eat your supper, she said. I've known grief, Mrs. Ardell, and I've known scheming, and they keep a body off her food the same way, but the body wants feeding either road. Her dry eyes went, once, to the paper pressed to Catherine's bodice, and away again, incurious in the particular manner of a servant who has trained herself out of curiosity, and kept all of it. His Grace doesn't sleep either, if it's any comfort. He's walked that library 3 nights running. Whatever the two of you are carrying up these stairs apart, you'd carry it lighter down them together. That's all I'll say. The eggs are coddled. Eat them. She was gone before Catherine could answer, the door clicking shut, her heels going away down the dark corridor. Catherine looked at the coddled eggs, and at the folded letter, and at the moths beating at the screen, and understood that she had until morning to decide whether she was a woman who carried her weapons alone, or a woman who could lay one down on a desk in front of a man and trust him not to use it against her. The decision was taken out of her hands at 10 o'clock the next morning, in the bright breakfast parlour, by the boy from the receiving house at the village, who brought a letter directed to Mrs. Henry Ardell, in the care of His Grace, the Duke of Avonmore, and the hand upon it was the strange hand she had spent a year learning to dread. The Duke watched her face change as she took it. What is it? It is for me. Her voice came from somewhere far off. Forgive me. I must. But she could not finish, and she did not leave the room, and so he saw her break the seal, and he saw the colour go out of her. And he was beside her, his hand under her elbow, before she had read to the bottom of the brief and dreadful page. It was very short. Sefton wrote a beautiful hand, as he did everything beautifully. Madam, I confess myself slow. It was only upon reflection, on the road from Avonmore, that your name returned to me its proper weight. Mrs. Henry Ardell, lately of Winchester. I had the melancholy business of my late friend Captain Ardell's affairs. I trust you found my agents conducted them with all the delicacy the case allowed. What a very small world it is, to find his widow installed at my cousin's hearth within the year. The magistrates will think so too, I fancy. A man with cause to hate me, a woman with rather more cause, and a child's fortune between them. I do not think I shall even need to raise my voice. I remain, Madame, your most obedient servant, J. Sefton. Postscript. Do bring the letter you once wrote me. I never received it, but a woman with your pride does not write such a thing only to burn it. The bench should so like to hear it read aloud. The parlour was silent, but for the larks. The summer sun lay gold across the breakfast things, the dish of plums, the chocolate going cold. Catherine set the letter down on the cloth very carefully, the way she had set down the Madeira on the night she arrived, and looked up into the Duke's grey eyes, and watched him read the page upside down across the table, watched him understand it line by line, watched the warmth that had begun, so cautiously, to thaw him over a wooden horse freeze hard again into something she could not read. He turned you out, the Duke said at last. Very low, very even. Sefton, he held Henry's notes. He is the man who put you on the road. Yes, and you knew him. The evenness was worse than fury. You stood in my hall yesterday, and you heard his name, and you saw his face, and you knew who he was, and you said nothing to me. Nothing at all. I did not know his face. He never once showed it to me. He is too careful for that. I knew only his name. She made herself hold his gaze, though every instinct of the ruined year screamed at her to look away, to placate, to manage. And yesterday, when I had read it in Pell's papers and was sure, yes, I knew, and I said nothing. Because I was afraid, Your Grace, that the moment you understood what I had brought into your house, you would do the only sensible thing and put me back on the road yourself. And I had discovered, God help me, that I did not want to go. He turned from her and walked the length of the parlor to the window, and stood with his back to her, his hands gripping the sill. Exactly as he had stood at the library window on the night he asked her to marry him. And she understood that he turned away in trouble as another man reaches for a glass. That the window was where he went to be a man, no one was watching. You kept the size of it back from me, he said to the glass, as I kept the size of the fortune back from you. Yes, the word was ash in her mouth. We are very alike, Your Grace. We have each of us learned to hold our worst card against our chest, in case the other should reach for it. It is no way to begin anything. I know it. I have known it since I read his name on your desk. She rose, and stood with her hand on the back of the chair, to steady herself. But I will not let you make of it more than it is. I did not come to your door for vengeance. I did not know whose door it was. I came because a post-chaise would carry me no further, and you were the one name in the kingdom I had any claim upon. Sefton is the thread that joins us, but I did not spin it, and neither did you. We are not conspirators. We are only two people he has already ruined once, and means to ruin again, and he has hit upon the joke of using the one against the other. The Duke's shoulders rose and fell, once, a long breath. It does not signify whether it is true, he said. That is the cruelty of him. He does not need it to be a conspiracy. He needs only for it to look like one. Read aloud in a hot courtroom by a man with a beautiful voice. And it will look like one. Two of his victims, married in haste, 3 weeks before the hearing. He turned at last, and his face had aged 5 years since the plums. He has not beaten us with a lie, Mrs. Ardell. He has beaten us with the truth, arranged. That is far harder to answer. Catherine came around the table toward him. She did not touch him. She had learned the rule he had made, and she would not be the one to break it. Not now, not like this. But she stood close enough that he could not look past her to the window, and she made him meet her eyes. Then we do not let him arrange it, she said. Listen to me. There is a thing in this you have not seen, because you have been too busy seeing how it can be used against you. He wrote to me, Your Grace, not to Pell, not to the bench. He wrote to frighten me into running. Because he knows, the way such men always know, that the strongest thing you have is a wife who will stand up and not flinch, and the easiest way to lose your case for you is to send that wife back onto the road before the hearing. He has shown me his hand. A man who is sure of winning does not write letters at 10 in the morning to a woman in a grey gown. He is afraid of me. Of us. Of exactly the thing he is pretending to mock. For a long moment the Duke only looked at her, at this dust-stained widow off the turnpike who had ordered his desk and held his niece's horse, and now stood in his breakfast parlour, reading the courage back into him out of his enemy's own letter. And something moved in his hard grey eyes that was not quite hope, because he would not permit himself hope, but was the loosening of a man who has been bracing alone and finds, against all his expectation, that he is not alone after all. You are not afraid of him, he said slowly. I am terrified of him. Catherine's voice did not shake, and she was proud of that, prouder than of anything in the ruined year. He took everything I had once already, but I have learnt a thing this past 12-month that a man like Sefton never learns, because he has never had to. There is a particular freedom in having nothing left to lose. He cannot turn me out of this house, Your Grace, for I came into it owning nothing but my honesty, and that is the one thing he cannot take. Because it is the one thing that was never for sale. The clock in the hall counted on. Somewhere above them, faint through 3 floors, a child's voice was raised in cheerful argument with a nurse over the matter of plums, and they both turned toward the sound, as toward the north, and then turned back to one another. "There are 3 weeks," the Duke said. "There are 3 weeks," Catherine agreed. "And there is a question I asked you 2 nights ago, which I have no right to ask again so soon, and which I am going to ask again regardless, because I have learned not to let the right moment pass while I find a politer one." He did not move toward her, but the whole of him leaned into the words, as a man leans into wind, knowing all of it now, the 40,000, and Sefton, and what he will make of us in that courtroom, knowing that I cannot promise you we will win, that I can promise you only that we will not run. Will you stand up beside me as my wife, and let him do his worst, and not flinch? Catherine looked at him, and beyond him through the open window to the bright summer park, where the larks rose and rose over the new-cut grass, and she felt the whole of her ruined year gather itself one last time behind her like a wave that had been a very long time coming, and hang there, trembling, at the very top of its arc. And she opened her mouth to give him her answer, and the wheels sounded on the gravel. Not the soft roll of a tradesman's cart, the sharp, bowling, too fast wheels of a gentleman's curricle, driven hard up the avenue of limes, and behind it, heavier, the grind of a second carriage, a closed one, official, and slow. Catherine's answer died unspoken on her tongue. The Duke's head came round, and every line of him went again to iron. "He has come back," she whispered. No, the Duke was already moving toward the hall, and the look he threw her over his shoulder had nothing of the breakfast parlor in it, nothing of the man at the window. It was the face of someone who has heard, at last, the wave break. "He has not come back, Mrs. Ardell. That second carriage is the magistrate's. He has not come to threaten. He has come to take her now." The hall took the sound of the wheels and threw it back doubled off the marble, and Catherine reached it half a pace behind the Duke, her grey skirts catching at her ankles, her heart going like a fist on a door. Through the open front the morning poured in gold and merciless, and into it the curricle swept first, Sefton high on the box in dove-coloured driving gloves, raining his sweating pair so sharply that the gravel sprayed. Behind him, slow and black and certain, came the closed carriage, a crest upon its panel, and a coachman in sober livery, who handed down a stout elderly gentleman in a bottle-green coat and a wig 3 fashions out of date. "Sir Hugo Crowle," the Duke said, very low, for her ear alone. "The magistrate. Sefton's friendly bench. He owes Sefton money, or a living for a nephew. Pell could never learn which. Then he owes him." Catherine's mouth had gone dry as the road. "And he has brought a carriage with room in it for a child. He has." The Duke's scarred hand found the edge of the console table and gripped it white. "Whatever I do now, I do wrong. If I rage, I am the unfit guardian he says I am. If I bow, I am a man who lets his niece be carried off without a word. Then do neither." She did not touch him. She stepped, instead, a clean half-step forward, so that she stood at his shoulder in the doorway where the county could see her, a captain's widow in pressed poplin with ink on her fingers, and lifted her chin to meet the gentleman coming up the steps. "Let me be the household, Your Grace. A house with a mistress in it is a different thing in a magistrate's eye than a house with a hermit. He has come to see whether there is one. Let him see one." Sir Hugo Crowle came up the broad stone steps blowing like a coach horse, his face the colour of brick under the wig, and made the Duke a bow that had a great deal of apology folded into a very little courtesy. "Avonmore, I'll not pretend this is a call I relish. Mr. Sefton has laid before me a sworn concern for the welfare of his ward, his cousin's child, and the law gives me no liberty to ignore a child's welfare merely because the hour is inconvenient and the host is a duke." His small, shrewd eyes went past the Duke and fixed upon Catherine, and narrowed. "And this will be the lady the whole county is suddenly talking of. This is Mrs. Ardell." The Duke's voice was iron-held in a velvet glove. "She is to be my wife." "So I hear. So everyone hears. 3 weeks before a hearing." Sir Hugo wheezed and mopped his neck with a great handkerchief, and behind him Julian Sefton came through the door at his leisure, peeling the dove gloves off finger by finger, his golden head haloed in the doorway light, his beautiful mouth composed into sorrow. "Sir Hugo does me the honor of his caution," Sefton said. "I asked only that he see for himself before the bench is troubled. A child cannot speak for herself. Someone must." His pale eyes touched Catherine and warmed, the way a blade warms in sun. "Mrs. Ardell, you are still here. I had half hoped, for your own sake, you would have taken the Bath road. I had half hoped you would have learned shame on the road from Cheltenham," Catherine answered. "We are both of us disappointed, sir. Will you come in? Or will you conduct the ruin of 2 households on the doorstep, where the gardeners can hear?" They went into the library, because the Duke could think of no room less terrible, and because it was the room where the worst of it lived. Sir Hugo lowered himself into the great chair by the cold grate, with a grunt, his stick planted between his knees, and looked about him at the books climbing into the dark, at the open windows and the green smell of the morning coming through, at the litter of Pell's papers ordered now into neat damning piles, and at the small wooden horse standing splay-legged upon the topmost of them, its painted gallop holding down the affidavits. "What is that?" Sir Hugo said. "That is the wards," said Sefton smoothly, before the Duke could speak. "A toy. Left lying about a gentleman's working desk, among legal papers. One observes the order of the nursery and such things, Sir Hugo. A child whose plaything is found weighting down her own guardianship suit." "A child," said Catherine, "who carried it down herself this morning to be near the people she loves, and set it upon the papers, because the wind through the window was blowing them about, and she did not like to see good work scattered. I was here. I watched her do it. She said, 'Now they cannot fly away.'" She held the magistrate's eye. "If you would know the order of this nursery, Sir Hugo, you have only to ask the child why the horse is where it is. She will tell you. She tells the truth, which is more than I can say for the gentleman who has named her a sum to your face within a minute of crossing the threshold." Sir Hugo's small eyes went, slowly, from Catherine to Sefton, and something shifted in the brick of his face. "You did call her a suit, Sefton, just then. Her own guardianship suit. A slip of the tongue." "It is the only tongue a man like Mr. Sefton owns," Catherine said. "Sir Hugo, may I speak plainly? I am told you are a man who dislikes being made a fool of. I am a woman who has been made one, this last year, by experts, and I have learned the look of the trade. So I will lay before you the whole of what Mr. Sefton has been careful to give you only in pieces, and then you may carry away whichever child, or whichever truth you please." "Mrs. Ardell," Sefton's voice had lost a fraction of its music. "I would think very carefully, in your position." "My position," Catherine said, "is that I have nothing left for you to take. And you have not yet understood what a dangerous thing that makes me." She crossed to the desk and did not sit, because she would not say this sitting down, and she put her ink-stained hand flat upon the ordered papers beside the wooden horse. The morning lay warm across the backs of her fingers. Somewhere out in the bright park, a wood pigeon turned its 3 soft notes over, indifferent, and the great clock in the hall counted on. "Mr. Sefton came here yesterday," she began, "and told me to my face that the Duke does not grieve over an orphan, but weeps over a ledger. He named my husband, his late friend. He spoke of the melancholy business of Captain Ardell's affairs, conducted, he assured me, with every delicacy. Sir Hugo, I am that captain's widow. And I will tell you what delicacy looked like." Her voice did not shake. She had spent a 12-month earning that. "My husband owed Mr. Sefton a debt of honor, lost across a card table in a garrison town to a man who had set himself out to be charming. When my husband was a 12-month in the churchyard and could answer for nothing, Mr. Sefton's agents called in the whole of it against me. They took the house. They took the chairs we sat in. They took a garden I had planted with my own 2 hands. Mr. Sefton never once showed me his face. He did it all through a clerk with a cold he could not be troubled to nurse. That is the delicacy, Sir Hugo, with which he conducts the affairs of those he calls his friends." The room had gone very still. The Duke stood by the window with his hand on the sill and his face like a man holding a wound shut. Sefton had risen from his chair. "This is precisely the venom I warned you of," he said to the magistrate, and his beautiful voice had hardened to something flat and quick. "A grievance. A year-old hatred. Do you see, Sir Hugo? Do you see why I was uneasy? He has married, or means to marry, the one woman in England with the deepest cause to wish me harm, and they sit here together, 3 weeks before the bench, with my cousin's fortune between them. And you are asked to believe it innocence." "I am asked to believe nothing," Catherine said. "I am asking him to read a letter." She drew it from the pocket of her grey skirt, the folded paper she had carried unsent for a 12-month, the one defiant thing she had owned in the whole grey year, and she did not give it to Sefton, and she did not give it to the Duke. She held it up so that Sir Hugo Crail could see the direction written upon it in her own hand. "You asked me, sir, in your letter of yesterday morning, to bring this to the bench. Do bring the letter you once wrote me, you said. The bench should so like to hear it read aloud. You meant it to hang me. A widow with a grudge sharp enough to put to paper." So, she broke nothing. The seal had never been set. She simply opened it, and the moths of memory came at her, and she steadied her hand and read. "You did not lend my husband money out of friendship, sir." Her voice filled the quiet library, low and clear, and the wood pigeon stopped, as though even it would listen. "You set a snare for a foolish brave man, who could not say no to a wager, and you sprang it on his widow while the churchyard grass was still raw. I have nothing left for you to take. I write only so that one living soul has told you plainly what you are." She folded the paper once and laid it on the desk beside the wooden horse, in the open, where the morning fell on it. "I never sent it, Mr. Sefton. Do you know why?" "Not from fear. From pride. I would not give you the satisfaction of knowing I had been broken enough to write it. I have kept it a year against my own heart, and now you have begged me, in your own beautiful hand, to read it in a courtroom, because you supposed it would prove me your enemy." She turned to the magistrate. "It proves something else, Sir Hugo. It proves I never spoke a word against this man until the morning he stood in this hall and threatened a child's home. Read the hand on his letter to me. Read the hand on this. Then ask yourself, which of us has spent a year hunting the other?" Sir Hugo Crail put out a thick hand and took up Sefton's letter from where it lay among the breakfast things the footman had carried through, and took up Catherine's beside it, and held the two together in the strong morning light, the same beautiful copperplate addressing a widow it had ruined and a widow it had begged. His brick-coloured face had gone slowly, deeply still. "3 counties, the Duke said. Everyone turned. He had come away from the window at last. "Sir Hugo, you spoke of a child's welfare, and you were right to. So let us speak of who would hold her fortune." The Duke crossed to the desk and laid his scarred hand on the neat pile of papers the wooden horse stood guarding, and lifted the horse off them, gently, and set it in Catherine's hands, as though he could not bear it to wait the thing he was about to say. "These are Mr. Sefton's own letters, obtained by my attorney through means I will defend to any bench in England. He has debts in Cheltenham, in Bath, and in Bristol. He has a tailor unpaid for 2 years, and a livery stable threatening the courts. He drove a curricle, and pair up my avenue yesterday, that he does not own outright. He has never in his life set eyes upon Lucy, except across a will. And he has petitioned, 3 weeks before Michaelmas, to advance a hearing. Why? Why the haste, Sir Hugo? A man sure of his cousinly love does not hurry. A man with a livery stable at his heels and £40,000, 3 weeks out of reach, hurries very much indeed." "You cannot prove the connection," Sefton said, but his voice had thinned, and a single line of sweat had broken at his golden temple. And Catherine watched the beautiful archangel face, for the first time, show her the man beneath the paint. "I do not have to prove it," the Duke said. "Sir Hugo has eyes. He has 2 letters in one hand in your own writing. He has a tradesman's sworn complaint in the other. He has a child upstairs who will tell him to his face whose lap she climbs into in the night. And it is not yours, Sefton, for she has never seen your face either." He drew a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped, and all the iron had gone out of it, and only the truth was left. I weep over a ledger, you said. Sir Hugo, I will tell you what I weep over, since the county is so curious. I weep that my sister and her husband went into the winter sea off Finisterre and left me a little girl who reaches in her sleep for a wooden horse, and that I did not know. I, who can manage 1,000 acres, I did not know how to be loved by her, until a woman walked up to my door in the dust off the turnpike and knelt on my carpet and taught me, in 3 days, how it is done. That is the household you have come to break. Look at it, and break it if you can. The door opened then on 6 inches of careful gap, and a fair head came round it, grey eyes enormous, a doll's bonnet clutched in one fist. Lucy had escaped the nursery again. She took in the strange stout gentleman in the green coat, and the golden gentleman with sweat at his temple, and her uncle standing tall and undone in the middle of his own library, and she crossed the room on small determined feet, ignoring the lot of them, to the only person in it who held what was hers. You have got him, she said to Catherine, reaching up for the horse. I looked everywhere. He is not allowed downstairs without me. He came to help, Catherine said, kneeling so that her grey skirts pooled on the carpet, and her face was level with the child's. There was important work, and he wanted to be useful. But he is yours, and he has been waiting for you. Here, she put the warm worn wood into the small hands. Tell the gentleman in green where you sleep at night, Lucy. He should like to know. Lucy turned and regarded Sir Hugo Crail with the grave suspicion of the very young. In the blue nursery, she said. And Uncle comes when I call out, even when it is the middle, and he stays till the horse is asleep. And he is too big for the chair, but he stays anyway. She frowned, suddenly fierce. Are you the man who wants to take me to a different house? Mrs. Pruitt said a man might. I do not want to go to a different house. The horse's legs come off, and nobody else knows how to put them back. Sir Hugo Crail looked at the child, and at the horse with its legs that came off, and at the letter in his own thick hand, and he set the letter down upon his knee as a man lays down a card he is ashamed to have held. No, child, he said gruffly. No, I am not that man. He heaved himself to his feet, leaning on his stick, and turned to Sefton, and his small eyes had gone hard and cold, and entirely his own. Mr. Sefton, I came here this morning believing I did a kindness to a grieving cousin. I find I have been driven up a Duke's Avenue to do the work of a debtor's bailiff, and made to look a fool before half the county into the bargain. The advancement is refused. The petition I shall recommend to the Michaelmas bench be dismissed with costs, and I shall write the recommendation myself, in terms you will not enjoy. You may take that to your friendly magistrate. You will find, I think, that he has suddenly remembered an engagement elsewhere. For a moment, Julian Sefton did not move at all, and the beautiful face held its composure the way a frozen pond holds a stone before the cracks run out from it. Then he drew on the dove-coloured gloves, finger by finger, unhurried still, because vanity was the last thing such men surrender, and he bowed to Sir Hugo, a fraction, to the Duke, less, and to Catherine, deeply, properly, the old insult that had no power left in it now. You have an honest face, Mrs. Ardell, he said softly. I said so the first day. I see now it was not the asset I took it for. He paused at the library door, and for one bare instant the paint cracked entirely and she saw the cornered, beggared, beautiful man beneath, who had counted everything in his life and been counted by nothing. I hope you find it keeps you warm. It has brought me to a fire, Catherine said, which is more, sir, than your arithmetic ever brought you. Good morning. He went. The curricle wheeled away down the avenue of limes too fast, as it had come, and the dust of it hung gold and slow in the summer air, and this time no one in the cold, bright hall watched it go, because they had already turned to the living. Sir Hugo Crowley took a glass of the Madeira he had certainly not earned, pronounced the child a credit to the house, warned the Duke twice more that he had been within an inch of a very ugly morning, and went away in his slow black carriage, with both the letters left behind him on the desk and the matter, against every expectation of 3 weeks, entirely closed. Mrs. Pruitt saw the carriage off the gravel, and came back into the hall, and stood with her hands folded at her flat grey waist, and her seam of a mouth working at something it would not quite release. "Well," she said at last, to the air, "I aired the linen in the long gallery for nothing, it seems, for there'll be no taking of children out of this house today, nor any day. I'll not say I'm sorry to have wasted the morning." Her dry eyes went to Catherine, and to the wooden horse, and to the Duke standing close behind, and the closed account book of her face opened, just at one corner, into something that on any other woman would have been a smile. "Coddled eggs at 1 o'clock, she said. "Both of you. You've neither of you eaten since the lark started, and a body wants feeding whether it's been ruined or saved. The horse may have a plum." And she clicked away over the marble, leaving them alone with the morning coming in. The Duke did not move toward Catherine, even now. He stood with the sun across the hard plane of his jaw and the shadows beneath his eyes, and the child between them on the carpet talking softly to her horse, and he looked at the woman who had walked up his steps in the dust 2 nights before, and Catherine watched him reach for the rule he had made himself, and find that he could not, this once, lay his hand on it. "You took his weapon," he said, "and you read it aloud yourself before he could. You stood in a room full of men with papers, and you were not afraid of them." "I was terrified of them." She bent and gathered Lucy up, plums and horse and all, settling the warm weight of the child against her hip as though she had done it 100 years, and the small fair head went down at once against her shoulder. "I told you, Your Grace. There is a freedom in having nothing left to lose. He could not turn me out of your house, for I came into it owning nothing but the truth. He had only ever known how to take things from people. He did not know what to do with a woman who had already been taken from." "Lucy," the Duke crouched, suddenly, to the child's level, and his voice had gone soft as the gravel gone to water. "The lady has had a very long morning. Shall we let her sit by the window a while? And you and I will see whether Mrs. Pruitt has a plum that wants eating in the kitchen." "2 plums," said Lucy, into Catherine's shoulder, already half asleep. "2 plums," he agreed, and lifted her, and for a moment the 3 of them stood close together in the bar of summer light from the open door, the child between them like a country newly at peace. And then he carried her away toward the kitchen, and Catherine heard, going off down the marble passage, the unhurried rumble of a man who had forgotten how to speak to children, learning it again with every step. He came back to her in the library, where she had gone to set the papers to rights, and had ended instead at the open window, with her ink-stained hands on the warm sill, looking out at the park where the larks rose and rose over the new cut grass. The smell of the cut lawn came up to her, green and sweet, and under it the night stalks from the garden below, and she heard his boot on the threshold and did not turn. "She is asleep over a plumstone, with jam to the eyebrows," he said. "Mrs. Pruitt has her. I am informed I am not wanted in my own kitchen." He came across the room and stopped an arm's length off, by the desk, where the wooden horse stood guarding nothing now. "Mrs. Ardell, Catherine, I asked you a question in the breakfast parlor 2 hours ago, and the wheels came up the drive before you could answer it, and I find I have not the patience of a saint, nor the manners of one. I am going to ask it a 3rd time, and it is the last, for if you refuse me thrice, I shall have the wit to believe you." She turned from the window at last. The light was behind her now and full on his face, and she saw that he had stopped trying, for this once to be the Duke. "You asked me to stand up as your wife," she said, "and let him do his worst, and not flinch. He has done his worst. I did not flinch. The condition is met, Your Grace. You have your respectable woman, your mistress of the house, your wife to show the bench. You need not marry me now at all. The danger is past, and an arrangement made under a storm 2 nights gone is a poor bargain in the clear light of a saved morning. You may give me my £4,000, and a character, and your blessing, and I will keep house for Lucy as a paid companion, and you will owe me nothing but wages. There, I have built you a door out, too. It is only fair, after the one you built me." For a long moment he said nothing, and the clock counted, and the wood pigeon began again its 3 soft notes. "No," the Duke said. "No? No, I will not take the door out, and no, I will not have you for wages, and no, I am done. I am wholly done. with arrangements and conditions, and rooms with the size kept back. He crossed the last of the distance between them, and he did not touch her, but he stood close enough that she could smell the soap and the horse and the faint warm chocolate of him. Close as he had stood over the desk, and this time neither of them pretended it was the papers. I told you on the first night I was not the kind of man who would ask more of a woman who married him out of need. So I will not. I will ask everything of a woman who has stopped needing me, who took my enemy apart in my own library with a letter she carried a year against her heart, who knelt on my carpet and taught a broken house how to love a child. Catherine, I am not offering you shelter any longer. You do not require it. I am asking you to stay because I have fallen wholly and inconveniently in love with you, and I would rather lose £40,000 and the case and the house entire than watch you walk down that avenue and take the only warmth this place has known since the winter. The whole of her ruined year gathered itself behind her one last time, the wave that had been so very long in coming, and it did not break and drown her. It set her down, gently, on dry ground. You have learned to make jokes, Catherine said, and her voice was unsteady at last, and she let it be. And you have learned to weep over an orphan instead of a ledger, in front of a magistrate, where the whole county could see. And now you have learned to say a thing plainly, that costs you everything to say. Henry told you I had more courage than sense. He never said a word, the wretch, about what would become of me when I met a man who had been hiding all his courage in a wooden horse. She reached up and laid her ink-stained hand against the hard line of his jaw, the first time she had touched him with intent in all the 3 days, and felt him go still as a struck bell beneath it. Yes, not for the shelter. Your Grace, Avonmore, I do not even know your Christian name, which is a great absurdity in a woman about to marry you. Edmund. It came out of him rough. It is Edmund. Yes, Edmund, for the door out, and the door in, and the small horse with the legs that come off, and the child who reaches for it in the dark, and for you, who built me a way to leave before you ever asked me to stay. I will marry you. Not as an arrangement, as the truth, arranged at last in our own favor for once, instead of his. She drew a breath. I love you. I have been afraid to since the morning you jested over the plums, and I felt the year thaw. I am done being afraid of it. There, you have it. Throw it in my face if you like. He laughed, a short, astonished, broken sound, the sound of a man unstopping a thing that had been corked since the winter gales. And then his arms came round her, careful and certain at once, and he bent his dark head, and the kiss was nothing the storm had asked for, and everything the morning had earned, unhurried and warm, and tasting faintly of chocolate and summer plums, with the cut grass smell coming up through the open window, and the larks loud over the park, and the great clock in the hall counting on, monstrous and patient, marking off the first minute of a life neither of them had dared to add. They were married in the small grey church at the edge of the park in the last warm week of August, when the limes were heavy and the bees were drunk on the late roses, quietly, without the county, with Pell to sign, and Mrs. Pruitt to weep into a handkerchief she swore was for the heat, and Lucy in a new white frock carrying the wooden horse up the aisle, because she would not be parted from it, and no one any longer dreamed of asking her to be. Sir Hugo Crowley sent a brace of pheasants, and a stiff little note of good wishes. The Michaelmas bench dismissed Julian Sefton's petition with costs, and Mr. Sefton himself was gone abroad by the time the leaves turned. The curricle, and the dove-coloured gloves, and the beautiful counting face carried off to Calais one step ahead of his livery stable, and he troubled the house of Avonmore no more. It was October when Catherine came out one bright cold morning, with her ink-stained hands and her oldest gown, and a trug of bulbs over her arm, to the square of turned earth beside the south terrace that the gardener had dug for her at her own particular and astonishing request. Frost lay on the stone in the shadow and burned off gold where the sun reached it, and the air smelt of wood smoke from the stable yard, and of cold earth newly broken, and from the open library window behind her came the low rumble of a man reading aloud, badly and with great seriousness, a tale about a horse. She knelt in the dirt, a duchess now, kneeling in the dirt, and Mrs. Pruitt had given up remarking on it, and began to set the bulbs, one by one, into the cold ground, the way she had set them once in a snug garden in Winchester that other people lived in now. "What are those?" said Lucy, arriving at a run, the horse under her arm. "Lilies," Catherine said, "and crocus, and the little blue ones. They will sleep all winter under the frost, where you cannot see them and would never believe they were there at all. And then in the spring, when the worst of the cold is over and you have quite forgotten them, they come up. Every one. They always come back." Lucy considered this, frowning, in the way she considered all serious proposals. Then she knelt down too in her good frock, and set the wooden horse upright in the turned earth beside the bulbs, his blunt hooves planted in the cold ground, his painted gallop facing the spring. "He will stand guard," she announced, "so they cannot fly away." And the Duke came to the library window, with the books still open in his scarred hand, drawn by the sound of them, and stood looking down at his wife and his niece kneeling together in the frost-bright garden over a row of sleeping bulbs and a wooden horse set to guard them. And Catherine looked up and caught him there, the morning gold on the hard, glad plain of his face, and neither of them said anything at all, because after a year of words that took everything and 3 days of words that gave it back, they had finally come to the place past words, where a man may stand at a window in the warmth he had given up on, and a woman may kneel in the earth she has been allowed to plant, and a child may set a horse to guard the spring. "Edmund," Catherine called up to him, brushing the cold soil from her hands. "Come down. There is work, and the horse cannot do all of it alone." He set the book on the sill, and came. "If this story warmed you, the long road, the open door, the spring that always comes back, stay a while by Adrian's fireside. Tell me in the comments which line found you, and if you'd like another evening of candlelight and second chances, subscribe and light the lamp with us. There is always a chair drawn up, and the fire is always lit."